me karakia tātou. He karakia nā tākota hawiti hakopa ko tūmai te ata. Tūmai te ata o horere te tapu, tōmai te Māori, ki runga ki enei ariki, ki runga ki enei tauira, ki atu tihei Māori ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko hana pia barau toko ingoa, no manira aho, ke tamaki makoro aho, wai takere e noho ana. Ko aho te kaiwhakahaere mātua o Ace Aotearoa. Tere aho e mihi atu nei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Hannah Pia Barral and I am the CEO of Ace Aotearoa. Welcome to our Thought Leadership webinar, a series that we will continue to offer as part of our program here at Ace Aotearoa. We are pleased to welcome back Dr. Karaitiana Taiuru. He comes to us fresh from his keynote at the Library and Information Association of New Zealand, Aotearoa conference yesterday. And as I mentioned earlier, during our earlier chat, I've also seen Dr. Karaitiana Taiuru's name pop up as a presenter at the recent AI Forum conference. And that really shows us that Karaitiana is one of our leading voices in digital technology ethics and Māori data sovereignty, and brings a very unique perspective on how AI impacts not just innovation, but also identity, sovereignty, and tinoranga tiratanga in the digital realm. Dr. Taiuru was also the keynote speaker at the ACE conference 2025 in Otautahi, Christchurch. You're welcome to post your questions through the Q&A facility as they come up for you during the presentation, and we will start with a 45-minute presentation, and we will address your questions in the last 15 minutes of this session. And I'll hand it over to you, Karaitiana. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Great. Thank you, my pleasure. Kia ora koutou. Thank you everyone for attending this presentation. I'm just going to share my screen so we can get started. This is a follow-on from the presentation in Christchurch earlier this year. So this goes into a lot more detail, and hopefully it's a lot more tools and resources you can take away with it. As usual, I always have little disclaimers about presentations I do. So there's no part of this presentation was written with artificial intelligence. Everything in here was created by me, unless there's a slide that explicitly states otherwise. Right, and this information was accurate as of September the 16th, so it was a few days old, but everything's still relevant. So we know in Te Ao Māori, our Waitangi Tribunal lawyers and our some of our leading leaders state that there's three catastrophes that face Māori. So one is global warming, which I think we're all very familiar with. Another one is genetic modification. And thirdly is artificial intelligence. So what we do know about artificial intelligence is that it can be either a colonial weapon, or it can be a tool for empowerment. And it's up to Māori to decide, and Pacifica and other minorities, it's up to us whether we embrace AI or whether we just kind of ignore it and just let it become that colonial weapon. So I'm promoting that we use AI for our advantage. There's no reason at all why Māori, New Zealand, Pacifica, why we all can't be world leaders in AI. We're all, for the first time in New Zealand history, we're all on an equal footing with new technology. I think, in my career, I've seen the introduction of the internet, the World Wide Web, social media, and I've seen the impacts that's had on Te Ao Māori. So now we've got artificial intelligence. I think, we need to embrace it and understand it. And as we already know, AI is already here. It's being used for algorithms in healthcare. We know students are using it for writing assessments. I think if anyone's had the misfortune of having to apply for employment opportunities in the last few years, your applications are probably going through an AI process before a human being. yeah, so now we've got to recognise that implementing Māori data sovereignty, data governance, Māori ethics is no longer an optional, nice to have if we've got the money. As you know, it's now an urgent necessity to implement Māori data governance and to consider sovereignty over New Zealand data and New Zealand artificial intelligence. And so, as I put on the screen here, one of the reasons we know already is that the New Zealand data is usually either incomplete or uses biased data sets. So academic research and data is often incomplete because minority communities, Māori, don't want to participate in what is often considered culturally unsafe research practices by universities. We also know from history, from the Waitangi Tribunal, that we have a biased health system. We know that historically the justice system and the police were biased. And so we've got their data that's being used for AI now. So what that means is that AI is using incomplete, biased, and racist data. Now, the AI is not intelligent to understand the data or understand that these biases are there. It just reads and processes the data it has. So again, if we implement Māori data governance, we can address these issues. And if we don't do this, I mean, the risks just for Māori, these are just some high-level examples here. We can, the biggest risk is we'll end up being over-policed. We'll, because of that biased data, we'll have predictive models in that the health system basically ignore Māori. Now, we've seen this happen a lot around the world already. Usually people of colour are being discriminated against in the health system, whether it's because of their darker pigmentation, AI machines don't recognise the skin tone. We've seen facial recognition systems look at people of colour and either not see a person there or interpret that person as being a gorilla or an ape and other animals. We will see, and also with Māori, we're seeing facial recognition technology not working with facial moho, so mātauranga, moho kauai. It blurs the image. We also know that the systems, while they are improving, that they're still not quite right for a New Zealand population. We've seen it recently, an innocent Māori woman was accused of being a shoplifter in Rotorua. There was a mixture of the bad technology and lack of human interaction and training. We're already seeing tikanga Māori being distorted and mātauranga Māori being rewritten. So, for example, just last year, the public version of ChatGPT, it interpreted, when I asked it who is, who is Tātipini O'Regan, the ChatGPT came back and started talking to me about his daughter, Hannah O'Regan. So it made a number of mistakes in those outputs. And so what I managed to find out was that the ChatGPT was using the Waitangi Tribunal reports, and it had mixed up Hana and it had mixed up Tātipini. So I mean, we also saw ChatGPT claim that Ngāi Tahu boundary lines, while we're a South Island iwi, from the bottom of the south up to up north of Kaikoura, ChatGPT tried telling me that we had Ngāi Tahu boundary lines included parts of the North Island, parts of the far north, the east of the North Island. So these things are clearly wrong. So these are some of the issues that we're facing already. So digital colonialism is another issue that we have. Now, this term has been around for a number of years, and it's becoming more and more relevant in today's society. So many of us argue that all New Zealanders are being impacted by digital colonialism. So we're all consumers of big tech from America. So we've got the ChatGPT, we've got Claude, we've got all those other public AI, and it's not reflecting our culture. So we are much like the spell checks in the old days would always correct the S's to Z's, and we had that American influence come through. We're starting to see colonial colonialism being replicated again in the digital world. So it's important to understand that while we can't actually see these resources, that they're now invisible, and they're colonizing us in an invisible way. So we've got AI bias and algorithmic bias. Now these are well-known biases in AI systems. So the AI bias, as I said before, it's based on the data. So if the data is incomplete, it has what we call hallucinations. Now, I've had some people say to me, "Oh, does an AI hallucination mean that the engineers were high on LSD and other drugs?" But it's not that at all. It's that the AI is like a super powered predictive text machine, and it's been trained to provide an answer regardless. So the bias will just pick up. The bias is inherent on data. So if the data is biased and says all Māori are likely to be criminals because of their high population of incarceration, the AI will assume that all Māori are criminals, or most Māori are criminals. Likewise, algorithmic bias. So this occurs when a person writes. So an algorithm is like a recipe. The more you put into the algorithm and tell it what to do, the more results you get. So what we see with algorithmic bias is usually middle-aged white men in America writing algorithms that ignore things that those programmers don't see themselves. So we see algorithmic bias typically impacting women and women of colour. In New Zealand, it's usually Māori woman and Pasifika woman. And so this is just simply because, the developers, their view of the world is much different than the rest of us. So one example would be if I was to write a recipe for making lunch, my view of the world would be very different than someone in, say, Southeast Asia who would write a recipe for lunch. And so the issue here is that we need people writing algorithms, but we need community input. We need more input to avoid the bias. So while we're in this new age of AI and digital living, we've noticed over the past 10 years, this is a 4-step process that we can implement to help remove AI bias, algorithmic bias. We can implement Māori data governance, and we can embrace AI. So I'll go through this 4-step process. So the first step is actually identifying what is Māori data and Māori data governance. While for many of us, this might seem like a simple question, we do know that typically most organisations don't define what is Māori data or Māori data governance. And this results in data governance not being implemented. So I prefer to use the Waitangi Tribunal's report, the Y2252 report. So that hearing was about e-commerce and data sovereignty. So the so the interpretation from the tribunal is on the screen here. Basically, any data that's about Māori or by Māori is Māori data, and it is a tauranga subject to Māori data governance. So I like to say Māori data is Māori people are Māori data. So then the tribunal goes on to say that Māori data sovereignty is Māori data governance. The principles, structures, accountability mechanisms, legal instruments and policies through which Māori control and exercise over Māori data. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break this down because there's a lot of information there. When we talk about the principles, structures and accountability mechanisms, this talks about having Māori data governance experts on governance groups. Now this is important because, I mean, obviously if we don't have different opinions on governance groups, then it's very hard for different views to be heard. So this is a change in the way we'd normally have data governance committees and data governance groups. But now, so we need to have Māori, and ideally we need other community representatives on data governance groups, or at least as advisory groups to the data governance groups. And these people need to be fully immersed in their culture and te reo Māori. They need to be liberal thinkers with real world life experiences. And what we do know from overseas is that these expert groups are usually best when they're comprised of people who have been incarcerated before, people who've been in the system, survivors of domestic abuse, for example, just people with real lived experience that you can't learn from a book or you can't go to university to learn. These people, the way they can look at something that might look innocent to you and me could have ramifications. So yeah, definitely diversity is important there. And it also talks about the need to implement and follow Te Tiriti principles and ensure that these are integrated into all AI governance models. So this here is one example of how you could implement Te Tiriti principles into an AI model. I think this is probably unlikely that most education providers would be at the stage of creating an AI model at this level, but this is this just shows that it can be done. So tauranga tiratanga, ensuring that there's a Māori voice at the governance level, ensuring that that voice starts from the conception, right from the very start. You're talking about the idea, right at the conception, right through to the design, to the implementation, and then to the monitoring. And so part of that tino rangatira cycle is ensuring that there's equitable outcomes for Māori and for your other communities, and ensuring that the community feedback is coming back into the development. It's about ensuring there's free, prior and informed consent of Māori data. And I'll talk about different forms of Māori data soon. It's ensuring that the data isn't just thought of as zeros and ones, binary, that it's actually thought of as a physical tauranga. So while data is digital, we need to consider that it's the same thing as holding a pounamu in your hand. It's the same thing as the carved pou when you walk into a marae or into certain offices. It's the same thing. So data should be treated exactly the same way. And then ensuring that tikanga is always implemented throughout the whole life cycle is important. Now, so the tikanga should be implemented into the organisation-wide strategies from the start as well. So probably more realistically, you'll be implementing a generative AI system, probably from one of the big tech companies in New Zealand. Now, I've just taken the AWS generative AI lifecycle model from the internet, and just to show that no matter which life cycle you're using, Te Ao Māori and Te Tiriti need to be surrounded by the all the processes and in the middle, so centered and at the forefront. So you see here, very similar to the previous model, the scoping of an AI. We can incorporate Te Ao Māori views. The model selection is also really important. We know that some models are naturally biased against Māori. We need to look at how we customize it. So yeah, each of these steps is very similar to the previous one, but as I mentioned, these can be implemented into any AI lifecycle model. And again, just adding to this, that the system's documentation needs to be documented well and ensures that it aligns to Te Tiriti and Te Ao Māori. And then we also need to ensure that the planning does consider the regulatory compliance of relevant Māori data legal instruments. So checking data to ensure that a Te Ao Māori view is considered, documenting and assessing metadata and incorporating Māori labels, which I'll talk about more soon. And then, the legal and regulatory requirements, which we'll talk about. Okay. Selecting the algorithm, as we said, algorithmic bias will occur if Māori aren't part of the training program or part of the process. And those models need to be trained with Māori, because if we don't, then we'll just have the perspectives of the people training the model. So if those people are normally, city dwellers who've never left the city before, then we're not going to see a rural perspective. Likewise with Māori. I guess the most important part here is to collaborate with Māori and make sure we're part of the whole life cycle. The testing needs to be done with Māori communities. And looking at mitigating risks with the deployment. So one way of doing this is setting up pilots in communities with very controlled groups, and then look for any things that are happening that shouldn't happen. In the tech world and the corporate world, we have three key assessments that we use with artificial intelligence systems. So AI impact assessments look at the impact of the business, of the stakeholders, and of brand reputation. So it's very corporate. So it's important that we include a Te Ao Māori / Te Tiriti impact assessment here. At this stage, there's no public assessment for that, but it's my hope that by the end of the year we'll be able to offer something for all organisations to use here. Likewise, algorithmic assessments. Again, this is to test and check that the algorithm is okay, that it's not biased. And again, we can use the AI impact assessment rules for the algorithms. And then finally, we have privacy impact assessments, which talk about compliance with the New Zealand Privacy Act and ensuring that there's no breaches of privacy. But the privacy impact assessments, traditionally look at individual privacy impacts and not privacy impacts of communities. So Māori, like other communities, other cultures, we often have a whānau collectives and community collectives that need to be considered. So again, ensuring that any AI provider you have is aware of these assessments and can incorporate a Te Ao Māori Te Tiriti assessment in there. The tribunal talks about legal instruments. So what we do know is that there's multiple legal instruments that are applied to Māori data as governance. And there's also at least 9 pieces of New Zealand legislation that talk about Te Tiriti and data. So in education, you'll be bound by the Education Act and multiple other pieces of legislation. So it's important that you're familiar with the legal instruments that are applicable to your industry. Just for a high-level FYI, here's some general legal instruments that we're all we should all be familiar with and consider with data governance. So He Whakaputanga, the first constitutional document between the British and Māori. It's quite important to recognise that the Treaty of Waitangi Act recognises that Te Tiriti is a document. The Māori Language Act, again, there's rather controversial discussions in Te Ao Māori about whether we should use AI for Māori language. So I often refer back to the Māori Language Act and the Māori Language Petition. We've got international declarations, so UNDRIP. At this stage, our government signed up to it. There's a number of articles in there that are very relevant to Māori data governance. The way 2252, which we've already talked about. The original Y262 claim talks about intellectual property rights and abuse and solutions. Now, this is really, I guess this is quite important. There is discussions right now that the Y262 and the is out of date because of artificial intelligence, and there's discussions about whether Māori should lodge a claim for intellectual property rights abuse with artificial intelligence. So I would suggest keep an eye out on that. Legal personhood is another hot topic at the moment. We know that people are creating AI systems based on their deceased grandparents, deceased ancestors, and of famous people. It's very easy to do, and it can be done with the public ChatGPT. So when we think about this from a Te Ao Māori perspective, the Crown recognises that Māori have spiritual connections to a river, a forest, and a maunga, and a mountain. And the same reasons the government has given legal personhood to those entities is the same reason we can talk about legal personhood of an AI system. So this is important. And especially when we also consider that the Supreme Court has ruled that tikanga Māori is New Zealand's first law, common law. So, for example, I see in the not too distant future, history teachers, for example, could create an AI based on a famous figure, using their books and their speeches, and that AI could then teach a class. And the AI would then start, thinking like that person based on their own data. So, two examples: we've got Orewa as a Māori language learning app based on the mokopuna of Orewa, and then we've got Nandi Chick as another AI built by Dan Te Whenua Walker from Taranaki. He's created an AI based on his grandmother. And so we're seeing these things happen already. These are just some just more general pieces of legislation to consider. Probably, I think in the education sector, we're probably looking at the number 2 there, Customer and Product Data Act, Education and Training Act, Privacy Act, Data and Stats Act. So these all consider Māori data governance. So we're talking about policies. So this is where organisations need to take the lead. Our current government has said they're not going to regulate AI. So this puts the emphasis back on organisations to create policies, to create those protection mechanisms or those guardrails. Now, for an example of I've created and modified some policy templates, which I'll go through now. It's really important to, for all organisations to have disclosure statements. If if you're an organisation of Copilot and Copilot's writing your emails, you need to have that disclaimer in your email saying your email is written by AI or it's written by a human. So this does two things. It tells the outside world that they're dealing with a human or they're dealing with an AI, and this can assist with brand issues. It can assist if your AI has got started hallucinating and said something inappropriate to people, and it builds trust. So for me, I would prefer not to deal with an organisation who doesn't human check emails. I'd prefer to have an email written by a human. Generative AI statements is important. If you're using statements on your website or any publications, you need to have a disclaimer that it's been written by generative AI. And likewise, if you're using chatbots, definitely have a disclaimer there. Make sure there's a human checking that chatbot all the time, and have contingency plans in place if the chatbot starts getting nasty. I think it was this year or last year, we saw Grok, the ex-former Twitter chatbot, basically started becoming very misogynist and very offensive. So I mean, it's relatively easy for those things to happen, especially when there's large groups of people trying to train the chatbot. I think this is really important. If you're going to be using a mātauranga Māori and AI, you need to have a policy. So again, this is just a slightly modified policy from another organisation. So this organisation is saying you shouldn't use AI to generate any Māori imagery, Māori art, or te reo Māori without the results at least being confirmed by the organisation. And typically, you would have a reo Māori expert or a tikanga Māori expert checking that. But what we do tend to say is that you shouldn't use AI for translating te reo Māori or generating images. So we know when AI generates images of Māori, it's using stolen artwork. It's using stolen, a Māori artist's work has been stolen to train the AI. There's also some very serious risks where I've seen an AI recreate a moko kauai of a living person. I'm familiar with groups of people who are scanning books of moko and Māori artworks, scanning Facebook and other social media for images of people with Māori tattoos, and then feeding it into AI to train it. So we need to be really careful about not doing that. We just need to be very careful about the mātauranga that we're using. So we need to have rules about what can and can't be uploaded. So photos of the deceased, carvings, people with moko, whakapapa, basically any data that can be considered tapu shouldn't be uploaded to AI for training purposes or to create outputs. So being an academic, I've unfortunately seen several students being accused of plagiarism with mātauranga Māori. So I think it's important that if you suspect the student has used AI for mātauranga Māori, get a mātauranga Māori expert to talk to that student and ascertain that way, as opposed to just saying turn it in, said this is plagiarized. We do know that Turnitin, it produces more inaccurate results when the text is not in English language, and likewise with te reo Māori. As you saw at the beginning of my presentation, I said there's nothing in this presentation is created by AI. So when you do create an image, video, etc., it's best to acknowledge it, how you did it. So Also, if you're using a few sentences in an essay. So here's some things that you should use to say that you used an AI. So obviously, reference number just for your personal use. What was the name of the AI tool? How you used that AI, the exact prompt. Then more importantly, how did you fact check the outputs? So this makes sure that your students, if they do use AI, that they're not just that they still have to think about it. They have to go and fact check. Recording issues such as misinformation or hallucinations is important. Again, this makes the student think. And it's also really helpful for people like me who research this area to identify how hallucinations are working. And then putting the emphasis back on the student, if there's any mātauranga Māori there, is basically, how did you respect the principles of Te Tiriti and tikanga Māori? And so typically this would end up probably before your APA referencing or in the document or on your website. And then, if the student actually talks about how using AI contributed to their learning. I think, this is a good way to just, to let students use AI, but make it hard so they just don't copy and paste. So this is one way students can record their information. Personally, I would just use an Excel spreadsheet like this. But as I said, I generally don't use AI for things like this. But you can see it's a nice, easy way to fact check your presentations, fact check work. So we talked about these before. I've got the slides around the wrong way. So these are just real life examples of disclaimers. So the email disclaimers, what's on my email. I think the chatbots one is probably on my website. They're very simple to write, and I'm sure in ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your AI of choices would probably write better ones than this. I just put this in here. Just some people I talk to in the education sector aren't aware that there's APA referencing for AI. I won't spend too much time on here, but just to point out that there's resources on the internet from APA referencing from universities. I was recently at an education organisation who didn't know this, and they were grappling with how to create their own APA referencing. So, definitely there's plenty of resources around. Again, just more examples here. This is just quoting AI output. So again, I mean, I think it's important that we incorporate APA referencing and how we use AI, especially in the education sector. Again, this it puts the pressure on the students to actually explain the AI, how they use it, and creates that sort of that proof of what they did. Again, multiple AI tools. I think, I mean, if you're familiar with APA referencing, this is all straightforward. So when the Waitangi Tribunal talks about Māori data as a tauranga, so basically this ensures that data is subject to tino rangatiratanga, and that it positions Māori data as something that's an intrinsic cultural, spiritual, and collective value that deserves protection and tikanga Māori and te tiriti to be applied to it. Where, as I said earlier on, the Western view of data is usually that it's a commodity. It's a resource that we can make money from, or we can gain power from. Step 2 is just looking at the data. 3 different categories of data. So tapu, in consultation with Māori communities, if there's tapu data, probably should be stored in New Zealand. So things like banking details, health details, data that's not, that's NOR, so that's more like anonymous data, de-identified data, or data that's in the public domain. So that can just, yeah, you can put that anywhere. And then the Rahui data shouldn't be digitized or published at all, and in-depth consultation with Māori communities needs to occur. So again, this could be images of tipuna, it could be tangi, the photos of tangi. There's a whole range of different Rahui data that needs to be considered. So in consultation with Māori communities, these three labels, or the three categories of data is important. Then you need to label your data. The National Library have data sets. I've created data sets for iwi, hapu, and marae that allow you to label the data right down to the marae level instead of just saying it's Māori data. This will allow you to say it's Māori data. It belongs to iwi X, hapu YZ, and marae 1, 2, 3. Relying on in-house dictionaries and then creating your own labels. This will help with AI. Once the AI has got the Māori data, this will ensure Māori data governance is achievable. If we don't do this, then the data is just going to be all data, and yeah, Māori data governance won't be possible. So the last step is creating and implementing your own principles. For the past 10 years, we've often, and myself have done this, recommended using prescribed principles. Unfortunately, it's been proven not to work. So the best practice is to create your own principles and your own Māori data governance frameworks. Then to actually incorporate these principles and frameworks into your existing organisation governance frameworks. Now, this is important because what we've seen in the past is Māori data governance and organisation data governance often clash. So the idea is to get them in as one. So you've got one data governance framework. Treating data like it's a normal tauranga, and then also looking at your own internal documents, strategy documents, values-based documents, and use a tikanga from that to create your data governance framework. So just on that, so I mean, out of the 8 universities in New Zealand, only there's 2 that don't consider Māori data at all. 0 local government agencies consider Māori data governance. And in government, I mean, yeah, the government agencies that do recognise Māori data governance have created their own. We see a real disconnect in Te Ao Māori with data governance. So, I mean, with iwi groups, 3 out of 85 fully have Māori data governance principles in place, and 10% of Māori businesses. So normally what we see here is it's about cost, it's about security, it's about convenience. So we need to get a balance and have bespoke data governance frameworks there. When considering bespoke data governance plans, these are just some ideas to incorporate. So yeah, analytics, emerging tech. So the AI we have now is it's the first generation of AI. The next version of AI is general AI. That's when AI will think like a human. And then we'll have super AI. We've got quantum computing on the horizons. And we've got a lot of discussions about Māori-led AI infrastructure. So all of these things need to be part of the any bespoke plans. Just for your information, there's a number of co-designed Māori data governance frameworks that you can look at for ideas. So I highly recommend Ako, their work. AWS and Microsoft New Zealand, being big corporates in the tech world, have got their own data governance frameworks. One New Zealand, Payments New Zealand have used prescribed a prescribed data governance framework and then added to it to make it work for them. So the key point here is that anyone can create their own data governance frameworks, and yeah, we definitely take some inspiration from these people. Te Pukenga have put their Māori data governance framework inside their privacy policy. So I mean, and it's the first time I've seen that, but I mean, it works. It covers the information that's required. Dr. Thomas Clark is, in his yet to be published PhD, has created a whole framework, Hawaii Ho, for blockchain and digital sovereignty. And personally, I think that it's going to be a game changer for data governance, and I'd recommend keeping an eye out on that. So let's come to the end of the presentation. I just want to say this, that we are today's ancestors, tomorrow's ethnographers, and it's up to all of us to be good ancestors and think about what we put into the AI, how we use AI with mātauranga Māori, and ensure that we are protecting our future generations. I'll stop here and jump into some questions.
Thank you. That was very thought-provoking, and you've given us quite a lot to think about. We've got several questions in the Q&A session, Karaitiana, so I was wondering whether if you can access that directly, you can decide which one you want to answer in the order that you prefer.
Yes. Okay. I'll just go down. So can you later explain one Māori data advocate in this slide? So I think the one Māori data advocate who fully recognises Māori data sovereignty was actually me. It's a bit of a shock, but yeah, I've spoken to other data governance advocates who say, oh, actually now you've talked about this, we'll how do we fully respect data sovereignty? So are there Māori AI systems for use now? No. So I mean, Te Taka Keegan at Waikato University is working on a Māori language AI system that speaks, I think he said Waikato Tainui dialect. And I think, we'll see other iterations of that coming out. The data tapu slide, what are your thoughts about who owns access voice? Okay, this is a really good question. So if I just start on the recording. So this is a topic, I think there's a need for national wānanga on tikanga and how it's evolving, and intellectual property rights are evolving with AI. Myself, I mean, I've got a grandfather who was a politician, and lots of his whai kōrero has been recorded and sits on RNZ, National Library. It's all over the place. So those questions they concern me. It's unfortunately there's nothing against the law for other people to use it. But again, I think we needed this national discussion. We need to push the Waitangi Tribunal to say we've got the new identity work coming through the tribunal. I think this is probably something we need to consider. And I've never agreed to having to get access to look at my grandfather's papers and things in various different agencies. But again, I think the Y262 recommendations, if they're implemented, this could probably provide some more answers to that question. So I hope that answered that question. Okay, cool. So another question here always is current intellectual legislation fit for purpose? Do data sovereignty principles, guidelines, okay, so this is a really good question. So we know that typically New Zealand legislation is about 10 to 20 years behind where it should be, and in particular with intellectual property rights. So I mean, we're way behind in New Zealand with artificial intelligence. None of our IP laws are fit for purpose. None of them recognise mātauranga Māori. And yeah, I think 9 of them kind of talk about Māori data sovereignty, but there's nothing solid there. The discussions that are ongoing about a treaty claim about AI, some of these considerations are part of those discussions. You know, how do we update the Copyright Act? I think it's Finland have passed a law that you know, as individuals own the copyright, the intellectual property right of their face and their voice and their biometrics. So, and that's something I think, yeah, New Zealand needs to consider. As individuals, we have our IP rights to our biometrics. Within the parameters of Te Ao Māori, how can we influence and reframe existing bias in AI? Yep. So it's all, yeah, this is about implementing AI and algorithmic assessments. It's about always raising issues. We know our big tech companies are, in my opinion, they seem open to talking to minorities, and they're open to being good corporates. So I think it's important that we keep talking to them. You know, like the AWS, Microsoft, Oracle. They're all Google and Apple and Microsoft. They've all done a lot for Māori communities. So I think it'd be good to keep the pressure up, keep talking about this. If we don't talk about these issues, then no one else is going to talk about it, and then so it won't get fixed. Personally, I'd like to see that AI is taught in schools, like straight from from primary school upwards, and that perhaps at high school students are taught about bias and how AI can be biased and racist and misogynist. Really interesting to see how libraries respond to this area. So yesterday I was speaking to a library conference, and there was a lot of good feedback there, and there was some talk that maybe some of our national institutions could perhaps take lead with Māori data governance and set the scene. Okay, excellent. So I've drafted from Donna. I've drafted a Māori data governance guidance for our local government to take out to engage with mana whenua using the 8 data pro. Yep, we're very new to this space. Want to do it right. We'll be asking mana whenua guide us on review from me. Okay, yep. So I've had mixed reviews from organisations about Māori data governance guidance. So Payments New Zealand have used it at the start, and they implemented other data governance principles in there. But I think if it works for you, that you're doing the right way. That's definitely the way to do it. Engage with mana whenua, and then I'd also engage with your local users, any users who have data governance experience. It's those people who will probably see gaps or opportunities in that framework. Another question here: how can the rangatahi play a role in advocating for Māori data sovereignty? Perfect. I think, I think just getting out there and encouraging our rangatahi to do this. The reality is, by the time some of us are, by the time AI has serious impacts, it might be too late for some of us, and it really is about our rangatahi's future. I personally, there's myself and others who'd like to try and mentor rangatahi. And I personally always welcome to hearing from the rangatahi who want some advice, and I'm happy to talk to those people. What are the key obstacles when you face pushing awareness of these, particularly in the barriers for implementing Māori data governance, particularly in businesses that don't know about mātauranga Māori. I think that's all about the business. I guess education is important. Implementing Te Tiriti workshops helps. One real life example, I did some work at the Otago University in the Heart Foundation there, the Heart Institute. They wanted to implement Te Tiriti principles, but didn't know where to start. So their first role was to employ me, and so we just had lots of training sessions, introduced them to mana whenua, talked about Te Tiriti, aspects of Te Tiriti that you don't learn at school, or you certainly didn't learn at school, in probably the 80s and prior. But then I think if the organisation doesn't want to implement, then it's probably an organisation I probably wouldn't want to work for. Okay. Repeat question, Tesney. Do you have any recommendations where to go to find decent AI policy templates? No, so cool. Yeah. I'd probably use like ChatGPT or Claude, and then just use it for a brainstorming session, and then apply your own mātauranga Māori to the gaps. Or, I mean, as I said, I'm hoping to publish some decent policies by the end of the year. And also, I don't like to plug myself, but if you follow my blog or my LinkedIn, you'll probably, there's different ideas come out there as well. My blog post has a category for AI governance, and so there's lots of different resources there. Sorry, another question here. What comes first, creating organizations' own AI or setting up defining data governance? Okay, yeah. So it's definitely important to set up, identify what is Māori data and Māori data governance. Then look at the AI policies and setting up AI. So a real life example, a local council in the South Island told Ngāi they had no Māori data. And no Ngāi specific data. Obviously both sides had their own opinions of that. I looked at it as that local council didn't label or define what Māori data was. So according to their data dictionary, their data systems, there was no Māori data. It's definitely important to do that first. Okay, I think that might be all the questions. I don't know if I missed something.
I think we are probably covered. And if anyone else has got any burning question that you haven't had the opportunity to post, please send it to us, and we'll do what we can to send it on to Karaitiana, and maybe he can send a response. But we really appreciate your time. You've given us so much to think about, even more than from when we were at the conference a few months ago. And thank you for sharing extensive resources that give our attendees and future viewers of the webinar just something to go with. And I think that's part of the challenge with the current space, isn't it? Is where do you start?
Yes.
If I'm new to AI, how do I even begin to understand the technology as well as the ethics of it? And on top of that, you've given us some other frameworks that are relevant to Mātauranga Māori. So thank you so much for your time and for your generosity. You have been so generous to us here at Ace Aotearoa. And on that, I'd like to end our webinar with a karakia. Whakataka te ho ki te uru, whakataka te ho ki te tonga, ke mākina kina ki uta, ke mātaratara ki tai, e he ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohunga, tihei, moriora. Thank you for joining us, and we wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day.